And of course, my stylist pipes in and says, well, it's funny because, one of my closest friends is the undersecretary of the Smithsonian. So it's like, I'm sorry, what?
Hey, Brian Miller here, and welcome back to One New Person, the show where we take a closer look at chance encounters to remind ourselves that every interaction is meaningful and every person we meet is important. Today's guest is Zakia Lieske, the event program manager for Innova Heart and Vascular Institute. I met Zakia just last year when she hired me to speak at Innova's third Patient Experience Conference. We connected instantly, but as you'll soon find out, she seems to do that with almost everyone. In this episode, we discuss the difference between event planning and event managing, the importance of working with and hiring the right people, and of course, Zakia shares her story of a chance encounter with lasting impact. And truly, it is an epic tale. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy. All right, Zakia, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Absolutely. I'm happy to be here with you.
Your official job title is it Event Program Manager?
Correct. Right.
So I want to start with, can you help us understand the difference between event planning and event managing? Because I think that's commonly misunderstood. And I'm sure I could use a clarification, and so could everybody.
Right. Absolutely. Event planner, there's a lot of overlap, but an event planner can sometimes be also more of a coordinator level. Event planner can also be, well, we don't like to say wedding planner, but that's sometimes those things can be a little bit more broad. Event management is more the big picture, having to do with not only logistics, but also strategic planning, event planning as far as the business goals and strategy, long-term, short-term, managing teams and so forth. Because I used to plan events, but I wasn't really necessarily in charge of the event, or managing staff, or coming up with strategic initiatives for programs and things of that nature. So I think my opinion is that the main difference is just the scope of the work that you're doing. And also event management has to do a lot with really being more of a master of the best practices in the industry of events management and meeting management.
Yeah, best practices in the industry. Like, can you give me an example of that?
Sure. For example, what are some of the best ways to communicate with your guests, your attendees, your audience? Just having a good knowledge and grasp of what are the best methods, effective methods in terms of communicating, and just really getting the message and the business goals across to the attendees, and letting sure the attendees know what they're going to expect. So that's pretty key.
So you did have a background in, you said you were doing event planning at one point, and then you ended up switching over. Is that a common thing for people to switch from one to the other? Is it a track that, is that a climb the ladder kind of thing? Or are they just two different components of the same industry?
I believe they're two different components of the same industry. Honestly, some people don't, like you were saying, don't really know the difference or don't understand the difference. And it's up to the organization to really structure that in the appropriate way, which is not always known. Sometimes people just kind of go with titles and then really honestly may not be sure what exactly should be the exact title. I've had that experience many times with different organizations. So it really has to do with the organizational structure of it. For me, I sort of negotiated that title because I've already been a corporate meeting planner. I went from corporate meeting planner to event program manager. An event program manager should be one of leadership. So that's also the key component there of event management is there's the leadership component. You can be event planner without being leader. So that's what I really wanted to take that next step to do.
Okay. So that makes sense to me. Now that I'm thinking about it, the planner is, to a certain degree, the smaller details. And you said wedding planner, and that, I think that for me, because I just got married a few years ago, made a lot of sense.
Most people are familiar with the wedding planners. That's why I use that example.
Yeah, no, it's great because our wedding planner did not manage our wedding. Not really, not in the grand. We kind of managed our own wedding, but our event planner handled the smaller details, and then maybe on the actual day of, they may have shifted a little bit into what you're talking about. They did actually do a quite a good job of kind of moving people from here to there when we were busy dealing with the things that we were doing. So as an event manager, what do you love most about it? You hinted at leadership being the thing that you kind of almost you negotiated for. You wanted this title to take a leadership role.
Right.
What about the leadership role do you really enjoy?
Primarily, my favorite thing, as you've seen in person, is on-site operations and management, meaning being on site and being the point of contact really for all the vendors, the client, the customer, the attendees, really being responsible for bringing the entire event together. That's what I love doing the most. And just that also involves not just sitting behind a computer, obviously, you have to be out on the floor and interacting with people. And that's what I do best. So I'm always the troubleshooter as well. And, handling any kind of challenges or problems that come across is what I like to do.
Yeah, I definitely don't see you as somebody who's just sitting behind a desk. I mean, I don't think I saw you sitting the entire
Exactly.
conference when
Exactly.
we met. And maybe for the listener, we met just under a year ago. It was
Correct.
it was about a year ago, actually.
Yeah, it was in February. So yeah, just about a year. So
yeah, and it was a one-day conference for the organization you're currently employed by, which is Innova Heart and Vascular Institute.
Yeah.
Was that relatively new position for you when we met?
It had only been a little over a year that I was in that position at that time. So yes, it was pretty new.
I was looking into I was going to say digging, but I'm not a journalist. My digging involved looking at your LinkedIn page. I was looking at your LinkedIn page and I saw that, correct me if I'm wrong, but I saw that you have previously worked with or worked for Volkswagen, the Smithsonian, and NASA. Is that true?
Correct. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So I have so many questions.
Of course you do.
First of all, that's an incredible resume.
Well, thanks.
Do you, as an event manager, so far I haven't heard you really allude to. You talked about the general business goals and kind of the big picture and the logistics. In terms of planning events for all these different types of organizations, how much do you actually need to learn about the field of the organization that you work for to successfully manage these events? Like at this point, are you like an expert in cars, art, and space?
Wow. I mean, you make me sound incredible, but basically, I mean, honestly, it really is important because I've actually worked for other places as well. But I'll say this, and when I first started off out at Smithsonian, I had which kind of leads to the first mini story I want to tell you. But I started out, really studying the arts, and and I studied French, and so that therefore you study the arts and history, which then led to the museums. So obviously it's linked together. So that's where I started out in Smithsonian. So that was more of an interest rather than me just learning about art or something like that. Like I kind of knew something about art and history. So to begin with, which was a nice out of college experience. So then, the answer to your question is, I mean, honestly, I think it's more important to really understand obviously the business goals, the look and feel, the culture of an organization to really be able to effectively produce an event for them. Now, am I an expert? Absolutely not, but I can tell you what you shouldn't do, how things should not look, and that sort of thing. I'm not an expert on cars, but I know, for example, I may not know the technical details, but for example, if I wanted to display a vehicle outside of a hotel, I can tell you that it needs to be set up a certain way, and it has to be a specific vendor that has to do that. Do I know specifically what those ways are? No, but I can tell you that you can't just drive an Audi up and just let it sit there. It has to be literally, the wheels have to be turned a certain way with the logo and everything, the rings showing the right way. It has to be cleaned a certain way, all those things that, I didn't have to do technically, but I knew they had to be done, for example.
That feels like the onboarding process in a new, because, right. Volkswagen, Smithsonian, NASA, Innova, healthcare, all these different things these are different industries. And I was like, you can't possibly have a background in all these things. And so
I do not. I mean, for example, NASA was specifically, it's obviously very specific, but I didn't learn a whole lot about space, but I did get to go on site at different space centers and get these inside tours that other people don't get. And, just being in the environment of those individuals and scientists and engineers and so forth It just really helps you get the sense of the feel and the culture, which is what you really need to do in order to successfully, plan and manage an event for them.
So that makes sense to me, because as a speaker, I my background is magic, so I'm literally never speaking to my own industry. I mean, I don't
Right,
get hired to
exactly.
talk to groups of magicians. I talk to all these, like, healthcare. I don't know anything about healthcare apart from being a patient and occasionally seeing doctors. I spoke at the Utah Correctional Association for their annual conference a couple of
Wow.
years ago. I know literally the opposite of anything about that industry. And so it actually, what you're saying makes a lot of sense to me, which is for each of those organizations, whenever I'm brought into a different industry, my first goal is to talk with the client, and
Right.
really, more than anything, get them to talk to me, ask the right questions to let them open up and kind of share what they're looking for and their vision is. And then, I ask them for some additional resources, anything that's kind of current going on, any buzzwords I ought to hit or I ought to avoid. I just need a general scope of what they're working with, so that I can take my expertise and kind of meld it into what they're looking for. Is that what
Yes.
it feels like?
Exactly. And that brings us back to the best practices is that an event manager has to know what those right questions are on that checklist when you're having that first initial meeting with the client. You have to know what to ask if you, and that's part of the best practices. We really have to know, like, hey, for example, show me your logo, show me some of your printed materials and your design and marketing, and show me, tell me what the look and feel is that you're looking for. What level of service are you looking for? I mean, those are, in catering and in audiovisual, what are the expectations and all of those details that you mentioned earlier that a planner should really know all those details. And then that's how you get up to being an event manager. It's like one step after the other. So it's a
Do you
lot of
have a
details, as you
it,
know.
I mean, I can't even, well, I can imagine, because I spend, half my life with, working with people in, your shoes at different organizations and different events. And usually someone in your shoes is actually my point of contact. It's not the CEO or the person who's theoretically throwing the event or signing the check. I rarely have a lot of time with them. And like, do you have a proudest moment in your career in events, whether it was planning or managing? Is there something that, like, you pulled off, or you weren't sure it was going to work and you were like, that, you just think back and you go, oh yeah, that was a good day?
I mean, honestly, the event that I did with you went really well, to be
It
honest.
really did, though.
So,
It really
because
did.
and I'll say the reason why I wasn't sure is because I really kind of did it on my own at that time. We don't really have a events team, so to speak. So I really was kind of doing that all my own, and not without a lot of input from leadership, or, and of course they helped me in terms of who should be there and who should be invited and so forth. But I really kind of did it all on my own. So I was really hoping that it would translate, my efforts would translate into a successful program, which it did. And just the feedback that we got from the attendees was fantastic. And from my VP as well, she was very pleased with it. So that was one that I really wasn't sure about, just because I kind of did it on my own, which I've done projects on my own before, but that was kind of a bigger project that I did on my own. So worked out quite well, because I feel like the impact of the speakers, and especially, for example, you connecting with the attendees and so forth, really made a difference and impact into the daily lives of the staff, which is the ultimate goal for that particular program.
Yeah, I mean, it really, I'm not pandering, and I have no reason to be at this point. Like, we don't have anything, coming up, working together or anything like it. I think I told you after the event. I think I told you back then, like, that was one of the smoothest, like, one day conferences, because there's so often they're just chaos,
Right,
behind the
right,
scenes. Like, sometimes, like a lot of times the chaos doesn't translate.
right.
But it's still nice when it's not chaos behind the scenes. And it was just, like, really smooth in front of the audience and behind the scenes. And I was really impressed, actually, with how nicely the panel sessions went. And I think
Oh, great.
that all the speakers that I met at that conference, I've been in touch with, or stayed in touch with, most of them, which is
Really? Okay,
almost
great.
never true.
Awesome.
It's been yeah, it was great. It was a great
Yeah, and that's
great
also
event.
part of best practices is the research component of planning an event, who should be the speakers, and how will they relate to each other? Will it flow well? And that's yet another step. There's about, I think, 12 steps altogether in total for the event management. But that is one other key thing. You can have a great event, but if you don't have the right people there, then it doesn't really work.
I have to say, from the moment that we met, kind of the day before the dress rehearsal and stuff, you lit up the room. You were bubbly and you were cheery the whole time. And my question is, does that come naturally, or did you develop that ability through your career from is that something that you
That's a
learned?
Great question. My mother would say that it came naturally. From the time of when I was a baby. But so I would say it's partly personality. Definitely for me, being in this industry, meetings and events, I've found that there are certain personality types, especially when it comes to sales, event management, and things like that. We are a certain type. We are usually outgoing. We're not afraid to talk to people. We're trying to be upbeat and have some energy. And that's partly, I think, natural for my personality. But at the same time, it is something that I feel like that for those who doesn't come naturally, it is kind of a honed skill. And even for me, it's a honed skill because you have to learn how to really. I have a natural skill of reading people, but you have to apply it to those best practices. I mean, I know when to back off. I know when not to be so talkative. I know when not to be, actually too engaging, because some people just want to be kind of left alone a little bit. Mm-hmm. So you have to really be able to gauge that. And that's also part of listening and really understanding your client and understanding, your sponsors, your speakers, all the different people that you have to work with. And, I can get a good feel on communication. And here we go, communication. I mean, you should have had, some communication with them before they arrive. And I can really sense, okay, this person needs me to engage with them in a particular way, and I'm going to do it that way. And that's how I function. I can't speak for everyone, but that's just how I am.
On that note, that's a perfect transition here because, the theme of this show is chance encounters, lasting impact. It's on recognizing the kind of, the ripple effects that our daily interactions that often we can't realize until well later, well after the fact. And, you've been dancing around the whole conversation here about, those kind of the ability to read people and connect with them. And I really liked what you just said about you treat different people differently, treat different people differently. That just because you are naturally bubbly and you've learned how to be super outgoing, or you are naturally outgoing, some people need you to not be like that. And part of your job is to treat them, to interact with them, to engage with them the way they want to be engaged with, not the way you want to engage with them.
Correct. Right.
That is, I think so many people in so many fields, plus our personal lives, don't realize how incredibly important that skill is. So I want to ask, do you have a story or more than one story of, a chance encounter that really stood out?
I'm going to start with the professional one. I have a professional one and a personal one. The professional one kind of leads back to Smithsonian, where it's a quick one, but literally, when I was in high school, I had this particular hairstylist, that I went to all the time, that I knew, go every, so often. And she happened to be friends with, not even necessarily colleagues, but just friends with the undersecretary of the Smithsonian. So here I am sitting in the, the stylist chair there. And, my mom is going on. We're talking about how I just graduated, from college, and I'm in the arts and studied history and so forth. And I studied abroad in France, and et cetera, et cetera. And my mom pipes in saying, oh, yeah, we're looking, to get her a job, professional job soon. And of course, my stylist pipes in and says, well, it's funny because, one of my closest friends is the undersecretary of the Smithsonian. So it's like, I'm sorry, what? For people who may not know, that's like sort of like the vice president of the Smithsonian. So that's sort of, that's a big deal. I was like, well, okay. So I thought, wow, that's a coincidence. So, literally, that's how I got my first job, honestly. Like literally I went and, thankfully my mother had well trained me into working and priming me for full-time professional work. So I had some experiences. I worked at the National Women of Museum and the Arts, volunteering there. I'd worked at the French Alliance of Washington, and I'd done some things that to give me sort of a head start into being even qualified to work at the Smithsonian in the first place. So thanks to her for that. So instead of me just sitting around in the summer times, right? So that was one example of literally I went and had a meeting with the undersecretary. We had a great meeting, and she recommended me for a job in the development department, which is fundraising and development. So because at the time I wanted to be a journalist, I thought I wanted to be a writer and all of that. So public relations and all that stuff. So that's what I started off doing. So that's one example of really just a chance encounter in that.
That I think that actually is one of the more epic stories that has showed up on this season. So many of the stories are actually what I imagined they would be. Little things that were meaningful, personally meaningful, that maybe it wouldn't have looked meaningful from the outside, but were for whatever reason. But like that, I mean, that's crazy.
Right. I mean, it obviously wasn't what I was expecting. I mean, I'm just getting my hair done. I mean, there's nothing really going on here. I didn't have to work in particular to get that opportunity. I was definitely qualified for it, but I just so happened to.
But I always have to say, sometimes I think about those kind of moments, and I think, wow, that was lucky. And it's like, well, yeah, of course it was lucky that you were in there at that time and having that conversation out loud. Of course it was. But I always have to come back and say this: the woman, was it the stylist that said her friend was the VP?
Correct.
She would never have said that if she didn't at least implicitly trust you.
Right.
Or
and she knew me
trust
for
you
years.
or your mom.
So,
Right. So that moment is not just luck. It's
True.
like, it's like you said, it's years. It was years of building a relationship. And then when an opportunity presented itself, you were there, you were ready for it. I always think of this song by Livingston Taylor, James Taylor's younger brother. He said one time, and I've seen him live a few times, and he said something that just blew my mind once. He said, "It's sad to be ready and not be called, but it's tragic to be called and not be ready."
Right.
The fact that you were ready for it, and then years down the line, that opportunity presented, that's awesome. You said you have another story, a personal one.
It is
Please.
sort of more of a paths crossing sort of story. So once upon a time, there was a girl. When I was first of all, in the 8th grade, and my school went 6, 7, 8, and then you go to high school in 9th grade. I know everybody has different types of schools. So when I was in 8th grade, my mom got a new job in another town, another city. And I had to move in the middle of 8th grade, which was so not great. So that was really tough, because those are the people that basically all my friends I went to elementary and middle school with. So those were all my friends. So I had to leave all of that and go to a new town. So that was already a challenge. And so one of the people at my old school said, "Hey, when you get to this new school, please look up this person. Her name's Pam." And I said, "Okay." Because I was kind of actually, believe it or not, a little bit shyer back then. I really wasn't as outgoing as I am now. So that made me feel a little bit better that I maybe would meet one person that I could be friends with, perhaps. You never know. But I went there, and I did end up being basically inseparable with this person, with Pam. So that was, back in middle school, it could kind of go any kind of way. You could either meet the person and connect with them or not, or maybe be friends for a little while or something like that. So it turns out, I'll just say to this point in the day and today, we are still friends. So I'll just start with that. But Pam, we connected on a kind of a deeper level. Spent so much, for at least 3 or 4 years, we spent pretty much all our time together. Go on to say that after senior year, we kind of lost touch, but kind of lost interest, meaning we had different interests. So we did different things. So therefore, when you're doing different things when you're younger, you kind of don't really hang out necessarily. So we kind of drifted apart. And it was about maybe 6 years that I didn't talk to her at all. I didn't know where she was. We lost touch, which was kind of saddening, actually. I really always missed her. I felt like there was this pull, this energy where I really missed her. And it wasn't just, oh, I miss her. It was like something needs to happen because this isn't working. I need to connect with her. So I would keep looking for her, not find her, keep looking for her. Then one day I was basically forced to go, coerced, I'll say it that way, by one of my other friends to go to this new mall during Christmas time. Now, Brian, I really don't like going to the mall during Christmas time and Christmas shopping. It's really not my favorite thing. But it was a new mall at the time in the area. And she asked me about 5 times, and 4 times I said no. But the 5th time she said, okay. I said, fine, I'll go with you. So I'm walking along in the mall, and there and behold, I see Pam. Who I just could not believe my eyes. I became overwhelmed with emotion. I was extremely happy. I just couldn't believe it. I'm seeing her and randomly. It was in the mall. But the point is, there was a person that she had been friends with ever since she and I met, which was named Jay. Jay and I, during high school and so forth, always were friendly, or he would say hello, or, just really casual. Nothing. We weren't really close friends, but we were always made a connection or seemed to have good conversations. She was still friends with him at that time. So what happened was Pam, after I met her in the mall that day, we kept in touch about over email, snail mail back in the day, and email, over the next couple of years. And she eventually moving around. She eventually moved back to this area, and she said, hey, come to my birthday party. I said, okay. So I go to her birthday party, and this guy, Jay, is there. So I say, all right, that's interesting. I haven't seen this person since high school. So at this point, it's about almost 8 years since high school. So I said, okay, cool. So we actually just clicked. Like, he and I just clicked. We were fast friends. What happened was Jay said, hey, why don't you come and see my new band? I'm started this new band. He's a musician. He's a bass player. So I said, okay, cool. And I went there, and it so happened that this music I wasn't really into. I didn't know much about it. It was basically metal, which is not heavy metal. I mean, it's heavy metal, but not death metal, but just heavy metal. So I'm a rock and roll girl. So I'm like, okay, I can kind of be down with this. So kind of went there and had some fun. And it just so happened that I really did like this band a lot. Like, I didn't think I was going to really, I was just being polite saying, oh, I'll come to your show. There was this guy sort of in the audience during these shows that I kept kind of running into. We would sing certain songs together after I got to know the songs, would dance together. And I kind of felt a really, really strong connection with this person. Because I was like, I don't really know him, though. I mean, I just kind of see him every so often, maybe once every 6 months or so over a couple of years. So what happens is basically this guy, Edward, is my husband now. So that just, to me, always blew my mind of sort of the path that had to happen for me to really even meet Edward. I mean, there was a lot of ways that was not going to happen. Through someone that wasn't even really in contact with for a long time, eventually met my future husband. That just seems a little bit odd, but I just thought that was an interesting story.
It's incredible. And to me, the theme that I'm hearing that in that entire story is your willingness, even reluctantly, to get out of your own comfort zone has served you well over and over and over again. I mean,
well, that's true.
You were discussing, being kind of a shy kid and stepping outside your comfort zone to make a friend. And then you got dragged to the mall against your will, but you didn't want to be at the mall. But you decided fine. And so you decided to take that little leap of faith and go to the mall anyway. And then you decided to go see a band that you weren't really going to be into, or at least you didn't think you would be. I mean, just your willingness to take a chance on something, having, even if it's something you don't think you're going to enjoy. What a great, I want to call it a skill. I don't know what to call that. that's
Yeah,
you.
I
I feel
never
like you
thought of it
really
that
took
way.
it to heart.
But thank you for bringing that up.
I mean, it feels like somewhere in your childhood, a motivational speaker said, "Get out of your comfort zone," and somewhere subconsciously, you're like, "All right," and
I tell you, it's kind of interesting. And, it's kind of a good reminder because as you get older, you tend to do less of that.
yeah,
So it's a good reminder for you saying that to me because, I need to continue doing that. As you get older, you kind of get a little bit more set in your ways and you just don't do things you quote unquote know that you don't want to do.
Oh yeah, Lindsay and I, we are so lame now. She probably wouldn't like that I just said that. We're so lame. We don't. People like, you guys want to come out? We're like, not really.
Not really. Right, exactly.
I'd really rather catch up on Netflix right now.
Right.
I really
It's hard
would.
to do that, and
Yeah.
I think I do surround myself partly with people who are like-minded in that way. I tend to have some of my closer friends are that way as well. But so I've never thought about it that way. But you're kind of making me, look into my circle and my friend family and just say, a lot of them are very much adventurous, more so than myself a lot of times, and open to new experiences. So it's pretty cool.
I really, really enjoyed getting to spend some more time chatting with you. I would love to, whether it's recorded or not, continue to spend some time as we continue on chatting, because I really enjoyed working together, and I'm glad we've been able to stay in touch.
Absolutely.
Before you head to the mall in hopes of meeting your future spouse, here are some takeaways from this episode. First, words matter. Definitions literally set the boundaries of our world. Zakia wanted a more hands-on leadership role, so she negotiated for a specific job title just because it implied that kind of work. Second, in social situations, professional and personal, it's just as important to know when to leave people alone as it is to know how to talk to them. Stay present to pick up the clues. This intuition is a learned skill, not a born trait. And finally, getting out of your comfort zone is always a good idea. Stretching leads to new experiences, and you never know what's around the corner. If you want to be notified every time a new episode drops, plus uncut episodes and bonuses, head to brianmillerspeaks.com and click podcast. From there, you can also subscribe to my weekly blog and get a bunch of free resources just for signing up. I'm Brian Miller. This is One New Person, and we'll see you next time.